Everybody
It is what it
to
is.
the October 10th, 2023 work session of the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission. We have some members who are out tonight, several of them at a conference, professional conference, but decisions are made by those who show up, so here we are. And we have 5 items on the work session agenda tonight, several of them, in fact, all of them pursuant to a SPLOST or TSPLOST project that have been in the hopper for some time. So I'm going to turn it over to Manager Williams to introduce the first one.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And yes, and I want to say that this is, these are all SPLOST or TSPLOST projects in various stages of their development and project delivery. And I think it's a real nod to the impetus that you charged staff with several years ago to put a lot of these into play, and that's why we have these. And as a corollary, the upcoming agenda cycle is going to have a lot of these and others. I think over half of the items are SPLOST or TSPLOST. So I mention that just to say to you and the public, there's a lot going on that might not be readily apparent, and you're going to hear updates tonight. And so we look forward to Memorial Park improvements and schematic design.
All righty. Well, good evening, everybody. Tonight, Eric and I are going to have the pleasure of presenting the Memorial Park improvements. It's a SPLOST 2020 Project 16. Our agenda is before you, and tonight's purpose, again, is to show you our proposed schematic design so we can move towards construction drawings and permitting. The user group, again, consisted of 3 residents and 3 staff as voting members. Their charge was to review the many previous studies, develop a recommended project list, which you approved, and then carry them into the schematic design phase, which we're here to see tonight. And as a refresher for everybody, it's important to remember that Bear Hollow Zoo is its own 2020 project, and the dog park improvements is a public utilities project. Neither have anything to do with what we'll talk about tonight. Slides 5 through 12 is all the history in this project, and I'm not going to go over it. Y'all have seen this a lot already. I will point out in 2018 of May, the master plan was approved by y'all, and it's sometimes called the vision plan, and it had its own public engagement process that ran from June of 2017 through February of 2018. Moving through some more history slides. Last April, you approved the project concept as a CDO, okay? The user group worked with our design engineers, Banesh, to develop the proposed schematics that you're going to see tonight. That included the CDO request to consider another pondside drive option with a 2-way design for the northern portion of the drive and a cul-de-sac turnaround. Because we had the decision point associated with the pondside drive, staff and the user group went back out to the public for input as to which design alternative they would prefer. We'll discuss those results once Eric has presented the schematic design. So I'll turn it over to you, Eric.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and jump into the layout. So the project layouts you're seeing are not new information. These are the same layouts you've seen before. We've simply packaged them together so you can see all of the parking and roadway improvements and sidewalk improvements together. And then in the next few slides, you'll see all of the pond improvement projects lumped together. But what we wanted to do was package these up in a way that relates to the funding. Projects P3, V1, V2, and V3, you can see those are shown there with the new grayed out asphalt and the lighter gray sidewalk areas. It includes improvements to the entrance. It includes improvements to the upper parking lot, including sidewalks and raised crosswalks. It includes improvements to the roadway down to the pond, improvements to the parking area down along the pond, and then the road back up the hill to the entrance. These also include stormwater improvements as well as sidewalks for pedestrians. So all of those packaged together, we have optimistically estimated those that you can see the $2.2 million number. We feel like we have the funding to get all of those projects accomplished. The project V4, which we're also showing but we anticipate including that as a bid alternate will be the improvements to that, the shelter area that's halfway up the hill. That's that little, I don't have a pointer.
You can use a pad.
There it is. That is this area here. So that is the V4 project. So that's what we're trying to show with this schematic is we anticipate getting all of those improvements done, P3, V1, 2, and 3, as a base bid design, and then budget allowing, we'd like to get that project V4 included as well. And for comparison, Diane mentioned the CDO option of not doing a loop drive the way the traffic circulates right now, but trying something different and doing two-way traffic down along that, that leg you can see to the right there. What that would allow us to do is turn the current entrance road into a pedestrian-only section. So that's the difference there. And then, of course, we would have to reconfigure the parking area and the turnaround area. And that would introduce a different traffic pattern completely to all of the vehicles that have to come down to the pond. And so what we wanted to show were the pros and cons of doing those alternatives. And really what it comes down to is the traffic pattern right now is much simpler, we think, for folks to understand. There's only traffic coming one way. If you're a pedestrian, you anticipate traffic coming one direction. In the two-way option, imagine if you're a pedestrian coming down those sidewalks, you do now have a pedestrian-only walkway, but as soon as you get onto the road section, you've got vehicles moving in all directions. If you can imagine a vehicle coming down now, the parking lot is frequently filled. So they come down, they see the parking lot is filled up, they have to go around the turnaround and then back up the road. So a bit of a confusing traffic pattern for folks trying to get out of their cars and get over to the pond and the green space areas. So that was the primary difference as far as the benefit that we saw in maintaining the current traffic pattern. Talking about the pond improvements, these were projects F1, F2, and F3. F1, if you remember, were forebay improvements. We want to dredge the forebay out. We want to improve it, try to increase the capacity so we have more sediment storage. We want to reconstruct the spillway. And then moving downstream, we'd like to reconstruct the small ped bridge that gets you over the creek as the water leaves the forebay and enters into the upper pond. And then F2 is reconstruction of that upper pond. And that's where we want to dredge out all that material where there's barely any pond left now. We want to reconstruct the retaining wall that exists along the sidewalk towards the parking area. And then we want to reconstruct the sidewalk and the path areas that will ultimately see damage during all of this construction activity. So F1 and F2, again, we're optimistic that we can get those two projects completed with our current budget. F3, we would like to do, again, as a bid alternate. And that would include improvements to the primary outlet structure for the pond. That would include improvements to the emergency spillway, which if you've walked down there is kind of a low area in the trail, and then it just goes down a cliff. If you've ever taken a walk down there in the woods, you can see the massive erosion. And then 3, there's some equipment with the pond, their aeration equipment that we would also like to include for improvement. So all of those improvements bundled into that package project F3, and again, that would be an alternate bid.
If I might share something too. So just so everybody understands, to the far right, the blue, that's the forebay. The forebay is fed by a stream that comes from the north, planned north. And the forebay, we installed that about 10 years ago to capture sediment before it flowed into the bigger pond. But that was to try and arrest the amount of siltation of the pond. But even in storm events, the forebay doesn't really act as a, so it is there as a preventative. If we're going to invest the money in the pond, then we really need to be conscious about the dredging of the forebay on a periodic basis as a catch basin for the silt that comes down. And one thing that Diana had suggested, and I totally agree with, is I think we need to also look at a way for machinery to be able to access that, every couple of years, so we might have to alter the landscape around there, but we should make it easier to maintain these things and preserve what you're going to purchase here. So,
And that's a good point. So the area between the forebay and the parking lot, we do have some green space there. You could do something, we've used things like pavers that you can grass over. There are these open geotextile grids, and you can grass over them so you maintain some green space, but you establish an area for maintenance equipment to come in and hopefully reduce the potential damage they do when they come in to do that dredging activity.
I'm sorry, Eric.
What's the cost to dredge the forebay? So we have to do it every 3 or 4 years?
Yeah. Yes. I don't know if we know that, Ronnie or Stephen, this ballpark.
It all depends on how much sediment we have. Now, let's assume that you don't have to rebuild the sediment pond, you're just dredging. It could be between 50 to 150,000.
So if you let it go too long, I think the inference is then there's a lot that has to be done. So this is just one of those life cycle projects, to help, protect the pond and the habitat and the amenity that it is for the park.
So is maintenance cost built into this project? Or
Well,
is that going to be something additional?
It's additional. The SPLOST dollars typically won't cover maintenance, and so that will be, but that die was already cast. That has nothing to do with this design. But we've not managed it well up to this point, and we need to put that on a predictable life cycle, depending on storm events, of course. But that's just part of it. And my whole point is, in this design, let's make it easier and hopefully cheaper to maintain what we have to.
So what I was going to say is that, out at your water plant, the Beecham plant, they have a solids pond that they discharge their dewatering solids to, and they have to dredge that about every 5 to 7 years. And it's just part of something that's in their operating costs of running the plant out there.
So if this was dredged regularly, we wouldn't be in need of this project that we're talking about right now, because.
You would reduce the sedimentation that's happened over time, yes.
Right.
Because
so
the
you wouldn't have
forebay is
do-
meant to catch
So
it all.
keep that upper pond healthier.
Oh,
and-
yeah.
So what's happened here, I don't know if that pond's ever been dredged. So this is probably over 40 or 50 years. But just with an eye towards taking care of these things for the future and future generations, we need to plan for that now.
So a couple of questions that have come up through the life of this project. Number one, are we going to drain the pond entirely? And the answer is no. We plan on staging the construction in the upper pond so that we can dredge that material, but we do not intend to completely drain the lower pond so that we can establish some habitat there for the fish and the turtles and whatever else is down there in the pond. In order to do that, the construction will be staged in a manner where we can keep a certain level of that pond. And I don't know that exact level yet. Once we finalize some surveys and we realize the amount of material that we want to dredge from the pond, we'll have a better answer there. I think we've touched on several of these already, but reestablishing the forebay so that we are not in this situation again in the future. Mitigate erosion. So the spillway structures have failed out there. They are needed some repair. So if we can reestablish those, that will assist us with mitigating the erosion. Reestablishing the actual water elevation in that upper pond. If you're out there now, you see it's pretty much all mud. We do plan on removing the island. We've talked about some alternatives to reestablish some sort of habitat to replace the island. We're still having those discussions, but we would like to create vegetation around the pond, but create a depth, again, in the pond that will support the habitat that we want out there. We mentioned the retaining wall has failed along the upper pond. Replacing that structure is included in this project. And again, the outlet structure and the spillway, we addressed repairing those as part of that F3 project. And again, that final piece of the F3 project is the infrastructure to help the aeration of the pond.
All right, you get me again. All right, so public engagement. So with this latest round of public engagement, that occurred in August and September. And with the assistance of staff, there was both an online story map and survey, as well as in-person community engagement with paper copies of the survey. Staff and the user group reached out to our community partners and public information, and leisure services assisted with social media postings, so you can see what we posted and what was seen out there on our platforms. Postcards were mailed to the residents within a half a mile, and these efforts culminated in 209 respondents with 136 written comments, and all that stuff can be seen on that dashboard there. As I stated before, this public engagement was to determine which pond side configuration. They basically asked one question: which do you prefer? Okay, and so this is the results of the 209 respondents. It's almost a 3-to-1 that they prefer the one-way loop design. The GIO office assisted in compiling the comments into a synopsis on these next two slides. So for the pondside drive, they pulled out some of the positives and the negative opinions, okay, of each and the overall sentiment. And thematically, individuals were concerned about creating traffic congestion and separating vehicle traffic from walkers and bikers and improving the throughput from the top of the hill to the bottom, down to the pond. For the pond and the forebay, no one really had anything negative to say. Responses are really either neutral or positive. The specific themes that emerged, GIO attempted to quantify how many mentions occurred, so that's where you see the numbers after all of that. Broadly, the respondents recognized that the pond is well-loved, and the composition of the surroundings is shifting and having a deleterious effect on the pond, and that engineered solutions need to be deployed. And it seems like there's probably some opportunities to educate further on the creature well-being. You know, like, we're not draining the pond, the turtles aren't going away, the fish aren't going to die. There's a lot of concerns about all of that. And what's being done to augment or replace vegetation and trees. The next few slides give you an idea of the respondents. Just threw a few of those in. They're monthly and occasional users that responded. When asked about what areas of the park they like to visit, it wasn't a surprise that it's the pond and the zoo. And when asked about what design goals they'd like to rank by importance, again, you see here, none of that's really unexpected. So in the upcoming agenda report, you will find an unedited list of all the comments, and they'll be sorted into pondside and the pond and forebay to make it easier for you. This slide, as Eric talked about, this kind of presents the budgets for the must-haves, and it kind of, you get the project number in the first column and what we call them. And then column 3 is the actual cost for that specific thing. Column 4 is the cumulative. Column 5 is the remaining budget. So this is my engineer mind. So this is how you figure out how much you want to spend and how much you have left in the budget when you're all done. So basically, working with staff and the user group, and these are basically in the order except for we moved pond revamp up, and I'll tell you why in a second, but the total of all of these, if you take that third column, you total it all up, it's $7.35 million, and we have not that much money. So the user group felt pretty strongly about carrying all of the must-haves forward into construction design and bidding these as alternatives. So with the money we have, with the cost estimates we have, we can do everything above that line. So F1, V1, V3, P3, V2, F2. And PS3 and V4, while we're bidding it as an alternate, Leisure Services may try and seek grant opportunities or might try and capitalize them because they're just really small projects. And they really felt like these are things that they can do themselves, whereas they can't really do the pond revamp stuff. They don't have $1.5 million. So they really felt strongly about trying to get as many of the big things done that they can get done. So again, I've spoken about this before, but with the uncertainty of the pondside drive, we haven't really costed this as a single project, okay? And when we do that, I talked about efficiencies. There's going to be some cost efficiencies. So I think that, there may be opportunities to get more of this stuff done once we get some bids and some alternates put together. Budget, again, is just shy of 5.8, and of that, 4.7 is available for construction and contingency. And the next step is for y'all to consider these proposed schematics at the November session. And then if you approve that, then we'll work with the designer to complete the construction drawings, and we'll solicit competitive bids. And that's what I have for you tonight. I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions.
Thanks, Diana. Questions from members of the body? Melissa?
Yeah, is there a thought to using permeable pavement in that lower parking lot? Is that part of the proposal?
So we are looking at water quality. There have been some water quality structures included in our cost estimates, but we can certainly look at some areas of porous pavement, maybe down in some of those parking spaces.
In the strips,
Yeah.
for sure, probably.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Yeah.
the main roadway, but the parking strips
Yeah,
themselves,
Yeah, that's common.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, especially since it is next to water and runoff is a big concern. I also have a question about the vegetation. I know at one point there's a mention of native vegetation. I'd just like to put in my own 2 cents for that, particularly stuff that would attract native pollinators. They're really taking a hit these days.
Connect to
Those
protect?
Yeah, those
yeah.
Juro spiders are wiping them out.
Yeah. Okay.
Carol?
Yeah, on that drawing back on slide 14, I just want to make sure I understand this.
This
Is-
one, the loop one? I mean,
Yeah,
two-way or-
there, are those, the side, you were saying there was sidewalk, and I'm like zooming in here on my screen. So is that a sidewalk going down the whole way now?
So-
And there isn't a sidewalk now, right?
There is not. You basically walk on the edge of the road or in the ditch,
Right, where it's
right?
kind of dropping, right.
Yeah.
So that is a sidewalk now, going down?
So in the two-way, this would not have vehicular
Okay,
traffic.
no, I mean,
On the
let's
one-way?
just go to the one-way.
The one-way, there's a sidewalk to the left side, right there. That white kind of strip
Yeah.
there, that's a sidewalk all the way around.
And then on the way up as well, there's sidewalk
On the
there.
inside, yeah.
On the inside there. And
Yep.
then that existing stair path over there, that's just what's there already?
Correct.
Nothing's happening there.
Correct. And, there's,
So there's better pedestrian access away out of the road in both
Yes.
of these, but
And-
in the one
and-
that keeps it basically the same,
and
the
even from,
one-way.
and even from the roadway itself, Grand Ellen, you come in on both sides, and then there's a raised crosswalk. All of these yellow crosswalks are raised crosswalks.
Okay.
Any others before I return to Melissa? Go ahead.
Yeah, it just occurred to me, is there the possibility of designing that so that sidewalk has a verge in which trees could be planted? So pedestrians aren't actually right next to the road? You know,
room, the
so there's no room because of the
terrain
train?
is-
Okay. Is there a big cliff on the other side? Okay.
I do worry, we can take a look to see if we can get some separation there. I worry that the wider we make that footprint, we're going to get immediately into trees that are
Okay.
adjacent to the road.
Yeah.
There are open ditches in a lot of areas through there that we're planning to pipe, so where there might be a ditch now, we're planning on putting the sidewalk where that ditch is and putting the piping underneath, so you don't see that. But I worry if we start moving those sidewalks out, we might get into some trees, and that's not the point.
Yeah, I mean, whatever keeps as many trees as possible.
Right, but we can always look at a verge. if we can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Carol, too, that path that
Yeah.
you see going from the upper parking lot, it's
Yeah.
very, it's a trail.
Yeah.
It's not something that anybody with a stroller or any wheeled apparatus is gonna go. It's a hike, and it's wooded, and pretty quick on the periphery is, wildlife habitat.
Right. I think former Commissioner Edwards called it a pig trail, right? I think that's what he called it.
Well, if I could ask, now that we're here, and of course this agenda item's coming forward, I know that on the floor last time when we talked about the concept, there seemed to be some commission interest in trying to keep the entire thing vehicular, but the public comment came back different and the designers had a different one. So I just want to make sure that we hear you on your concerns on the one-way versus two-way.
I can be very clear, and from having longevity with this park, that this is preferred. You've got people going in all kinds of directions, and it is a safety enhancement that the vehicle passes you and you're walking, or a kid's chasing a ball, you know what direction the traffic is, and you don't have a dead end. And a lot of times, because of the terrain, there are people that are being dropped off, and then the car's parked somewhere else. And again, you're not doubling up. I felt that was that this was an outstanding design the first time, and I'm glad that the public chimed in favor of this as well.
I'm definitely happy with this design as a super user of this facility, and particularly with the sidewalk addition.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but this loop is in the vision plan, right? The master plan as a loop.
Yeah, so that was really sort of a last minute
Yeah.
add to contemplate, and I'm glad that it caught in time for the public input to chime in
To
on
weigh
this as
on either
well.
way, yeah.
I think that there's going to be a big improvement, but we don't need to change everything. And that flow that people will expect, or knowing what you're watching. Like you say, one way versus the kid runs by and then also there's a car coming the other way.
And I would also point out, while it was also preferred by the public, it was also preferred by the user group. Their user group recommended it, and you'll see that as an item,
Yeah.
too.
So
your
hopefully in
agenda
the
report.
agenda item, it'll come forward as the one-way loop,
It does.
and then,
That's the user group recommended design. Okay, awesome.
All
Thank you.
right, everybody good? All right, we're going to
Thank
move on
you.
to the next item, which
Thank
is
you. Yep.
TSPLOST 2018, Project 15, Atlanta Highway. And of course, there are several segments here that we'll discuss, as we have in recent work sessions as well. Derek Doster from the SPLOST office is plugging in as we speak. Good to see you, Derek.
It's good to be here. How's everybody tonight?
Really good. That's this page.
4728. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Good evening. We've got Michael Clanahan right behind me. He is one of our younger project administrators in the SPLOST office, and he's going to take us through the work session tonight. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and also got Transportation and Public Works here to back us up as well.
Thanks, Michael. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. It's good to see everyone tonight. My name is Michael Clanahan. I work in the SPLOST office with Derek Doster and Stephen Bailey, our interim capital projects director. We have the design team with us tonight, Banesh, Victor, and Eric. And I'm excited to bring to you the Timothy Road Mitchell Bridge corridor improvements. In the package that was sent out, I'm not going to go through every slide tonight, but I will hit the highlights and be happy to answer any questions that you have. All right, as stated, my purpose tonight is to present the proposed preliminary plans, cover some recent history, review the plans and the budget. And like I said, I'll skip ahead to the most current history of the project, which is right here. On December 6th, the CDO for Mitchell Bridge and Timothy Road was approved and designated to the TSPLOST 2023 program. This CDO authorized staff to move the must-haves to the preliminary plan phase. In July, the preliminary plans for Mitchell Bridge Road were approved by the user group, and in July, the preliminary plans for Timothy Road Section 1 and 2 were approved by the user group. October, Mayor and Commission accepted the 2022 Bridge Investment Program grant that included Mitchell Bridge. The proposed preliminary plans include Timothy Road Section 1, Mitchell Bridge, and Timothy Road Section 2. Timothy Road Section 1. On the cover sheet for Timothy Road Section 1, we can see where the shared youth path begins at Skyline Parkway and ends at Loop 10. Typical sections. All right. Starting at Skyline Parkway, we are constructing a 10-foot shared use path. At Skyline Parkway, we'll be installing crosswalks, the ADA ramps, and reconstructing the connection to the existing RRFB to help pedestrians safely across the street, as well as tying into the current sidewalks along Timothy Road. Shared youth path will then continue across Kalen Hollow, along where you will see on the left side of the screen a crosswalk across Kalen Hollow, and the same across Xavier Drive, which is giving pedestrians access to cross right there. Typically right now there's no crosswalk at these intersections, so I wanted to point that out. And as we get to Tanglewood, same thing. And moving on down Timothy Road, right here. The shared use path, as you can see, we'll have some driveway construction. We'll be getting some driveway easement for some new driveways, as well as across Tanglewood again with another crosswalk, which brings us to the retaining wall, concrete ditch, and new accessible ramp for pedestrians, and the concrete driveways that will be constructed in this area. Moving across Branford Place, you can see another section of pedestrian crossing, leading us up to Towns Walk Drive, where there'll be striping added for a crosswalk here, as well as Township Lane and Manor Haven Court. Same thing moving across Autumnwood Avenue, thus leading us into Loop 10, where you can see at this intersection, we have a lot of crosswalks tying in across to cross the Timothy Road, which there is a need for with pedestrians trying to get across the street. So we are very excited about that. The summary of the construction cost estimate, Timothy Road Section 1, the shared use path, $4,335,000. Going into that, you have the grading, erosion control, things of that nature. And there are 46 impacted parcels along Timothy Road Section 1, with additional parcels may be impacted during the final development. Moving along, we have Mitchell Bridge Road.
Can I ask a question
ma'am.
before you go on? On those impacted parcels, obviously, could you explain what's involved in that in terms of, I don't know, is it
Right-of-way
not the
needs.
right-of-way? Is it any of these people's property, or how's that work out in this area?
Yes, ma'am. Most of these will be temporary construction easements for grading, for slopes, maybe the possibility of a little bit of right-of-way that we may need after, making the assumption that Mayor and Commission have blessed the preliminary plans as presented tonight. We will continue to work with the design team and go to these property owners, reveal or share what the effects of that property may be, work with them, see what we can do. Some of them may request more of retaining wall feature. Some of them may request, hey, these are all sweet gum trees, can you make sure that they're gone? So we've just, utilized that opportunity to work with those property owners. You saw some of the driveways that we need to rebuild due to come across there. So between drainage activities, just grading, and then just producing a level path for the section. Again, most of them we anticipate being temporary construction easements, a little bit of permanent construction easement, and a few of them will have some right-of-way acquisitions.
It's a lot of communication.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
To piggyback on that, can you go back one slide? And then, so this would be what's happening in the area, affected area?
Yes, ma'am.
This list right here.
All right.
Thank you for your questions. All right, we're moving to Mitchell Bridge Road. This is going to go the west of Middle Oconee River to the Ben Burton Park entrance. All right. All right, so moving along right here, you can see as we start at the bridge, we're going to be tying in, and where we transition to the bridge, we'll actually be going from a 10-foot shared path, we'll transition to an 8-foot, and then we'll transition and tie in to the bridge there. We will have the walls to keep pedestrians safe, and again, they call them like Jersey barriers to make sure everyone is safe while crossing the bridge. All right, moving along, you can see where we tie into Ben Burton Park. If you look in the top right, that's the restrooms coming out of the parking lot right here. We'll be tying in, as again, we come off the bridge, we go from the bridge to an 8-foot to a 10-foot shared use path transition, again, with some fencing that would be put up and some guardrail. And then we will carry along down Mitchell Bridge and carry this onto the parking lot right here, where we will be tying in to the already existing sidewalk along Mitchell Bridge Road. And again, this right here, this is the condominiums that are right here at this entrance. The this Mitchell Bridge section budget is $2 million, and again, going into it's the grading, erosion control, standard concrete paving, things of that nature. There are going to be 4 impacted parcels throughout Mitchell Bridge Road section. Again, additional parcels may be impacted during the final development. All right, moving along, Timothy Road section. Yes, ma'am.
That 2 million is for the 0.36 miles, right?
Yes, ma'am.
There, okay, I'm just getting my numbers down.
It is, just as a side point, it is a high cost for a short distance, but the majority of that is there's a large retaining wall that will be required in front of the park. That eats up a substantial amount of money. And then reusing the bridge, which of course saves us money from building a new one. However, we do have to put in proper
Buffering.
bike pedestrian safety measures as, like Michael said, the Jersey barrier type connectivity to keep anybody from moving from a travel lane over to into the bike refuge area.
All right. Moving along, Timothy Road, Section 2. This will show where it starts at State Route 10, the loop, and ends at Rhodes Drive. All right. Here we are starting at the loop. You can see the crosswalks that will be added in addition with the shared use path along this. This is at the corner of the Timothy Baptist Church, if you're familiar with the area. This section is going to be safe for pedestrians, again, with the crosswalks and the handicap ramps that'll be going in right here. Taking us down Timothy Road, past the church. You can see right here where we have some driveway easements that we'll have to obtain for construction of new driveways. Right. And then that will bring us to where we will tie in at Rhodes Drive. As you can see right here, this intersection will be getting, on the pillar pins it'll show we get new crosswalks, new RFB, new ADA ramps for pedestrians here. If you've been to this intersection, you can see there is a need for it, and we like to think that we've handled that right here with the crosswalks and whatnot. For Timothy Road, Section 2, the budget for the shared use path is $1,160,000. And there will be 6 impacted parcels, with additional parcels may be impacted during the final development. Any questions on this part?
I've got,
Sir.
okay.
Mike?
Well, I was gonna let you do your last budget slide
Oh,
there.
okay. I'll turn it back over to Derek.
In wrapping up, again, y'all approved this to move this to the 2023 program, so under the Project 6 program, you can see the budget numbers there that are available. We believe we've got enough currently for the preliminary construction cost estimates to build Timothy 1, what we call Timothy 1 section, and of course Mitchell Bridge Road and Timothy 2. We'd like to go ahead and complete the preliminary designs, get it right away where we can, and then depending on the designated contingency afterwards, or if land cost or utility costs don't reach that level, we could reutilize some of that money to go to construction funds to possibly build out Mitchell Bridge or Timothy 2. We do note that October 3rd, just last week, that y'all did approve the Bridge Improvement Plan grant, which may include some funding or some planning efforts for the bridge there at Mitchell Bridge Road. So we want to keep that in the back of our mind as we move forward as well. So we don't want to duplicate any effort. However, we feel like this is a good point to get these preliminary plans approved, and that's the 2 agenda reports that we'll be bringing forward, one for Timothy standalone and one for Mitchell Bridge standalone, to kind of go ahead and separate those appropriately.
Mike?
Okay, thank you. And just a few questions, if you don't mind. So I'm looking at the Section 2 of Timothy Road, and that's on the other side of it's not on the same side as the church, is it? Because I thought the motion was that it would be on the other side of the street and not impact.
You're absolutely correct, Commissioner. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. That was
You're
the
absolutely
first-
correct. The CDO that y'all gave us was to move the shared use path from the north side to the south side.
Right.
We still refer to it as the church property because the church actually owns some property there.
Oh, across the street. Okay.
So as we move through the church property, we have done as you requested and you desired. We did move it to the south side.
Okay.
So we're not going in front of I'll call it the church proper, in front of the building.
And the residents along there, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but we are on the south side, which the church does have some property, and
Okay.
lack of a better way, we just still continue to refer to it as the church.
And the budget, if you want to go to that slide real quick, I had some questions about that. So we have the TSPLOST 20, whichever number it is, 23. And that was roughly $6 million, as you have up there, 6.7 million. But this project, the title we have it here is from 2018, Project 15, and it looks like there's still 2.8 million left in that budget. So you see where I'm going here? I mean, if you combine the two, then we can hit a little bit more of these projects.
It can be. We've deferred. I think we would defer that question for a later date. And the reason I say that, if we can develop the plans, we're working with the manager's office because 2023 program has another Atlanta Highway program.
That's what
And so what we're working with him to try to get some additional user groups, due to the way the commission districts changed. So we're trying to plan a little bit if we can have that difference.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, in planning for these projects, I mean, if there's a way where we can utilize those 2018 dollars to help get some of these projects, I mean, that just leaves us short. Oh goodness, if you got 2.8, just a few $100,000 to complete the whole thing on that. So certainly as we discuss this during the agenda setting and voting session, that may be something for, certainly, I think it's District Commissioner Fisher and Commissioner Culpepper to think about as well.
And Derek or Manager Williams, just when would this naturally come up for construction? Just kind of thinking about Mike's point, just in terms of sequencing of this.
It's gonna take a while.
plans.
When's your anticipated timeline, sir?
For the Timothy Road section, if it moves forward, we think we could finish the plans, permitting, right-of-way construction, all that next year, and then be ready for construction in 2025 calendar year.
Okay. It'll take a while,
We do,
for sure.
as we mentioned, some of the planning grant for the Mitchell Bridge Road, we feel like that effort needs to, unless you direct, of course, we believe that effort needs to move forward, and kind of
Sure.
dovetail those together.
And let me ask about the 10-foot multi-use path, and just, I certainly am curious, I'd be interested to see the 46 parcels, I know you got engaged them, but was any thought given to doing like a 9-foot path or something to make it a little less expensive? No, it probably wouldn't, I don't know.
It
You're
really
the-
wouldn't. And when you include, well, let me back up. Regardless whether it's a
grading,
5-foot, 6-foot, 8-foot, 10-foot, just, mobilization, the equipment that's out there, moving dirt, you're putting silt fence in, if you put it here or there, it's all part of it. Yes, you would probably save a minute amount of dollars on actual concrete. However, then we have to consider, shared use path, 10-foot really is the minimum now, that Federal Highway wants us to look at, based on their bike ped guidelines.
Right.
And so anything under that, we'll track our direction from you, don't get me wrong, but we think it's probably a disservice to bring that forward.
I got you.
In that light.
The other question, and I'll stop, but over on Mitchell Bridge Road, did you consider the other side of the street so you wouldn't have to, would you still have to build that large retaining wall on the other side of the street as you're doing on the park side?
No, sir. The thought process is moving on Mitchell Bridge Road. Go back.
Because there is a sidewalk that I think connects down, going toward Tallahassee Road on both sides. if I'm not
Everything on
mistaken.
Mitchell Bridge Road in this vicinity
Right, it's on that side.
is on the park side.
Right,
And so to try to move pedestrians or bikes across that traffic, we felt it was probably not appropriate.
right.
So we wanted to keep them on the park side. It definitely makes most sense.
Yeah, it makes me, I can see why you did it, but I
Yeah.
was just looking from
From a dollar
standpoint.
Yeah, we didn't anticipate that, or as we developed the project concepts,
Yeah,
we didn't, we thought about it, but we didn't fully develop it in that area.
okay, thank you.
Melissa?
Yeah, I'm looking at the history and I'm wondering where Athens in Motion has weighed in on this
Oh, God.
along the way, or is that to come?
Well, Athens in Motion, we've got user group members that are part of that.
Okay, so, but it hasn't actually gone before the whole Athens in Motion Commission?
No.
Yeah, because I'm just curious as to why, a shared use path is being recommended rather than the two-way bikeway, when this is like, clearly suburban, high-speed corridor that tends to get that recommendation, if you go by what's in the Athens in Motion plan. Yeah, I'm just wondering, what kind of recommendations came out of that commission, because I couldn't see anything as to where it went before the whole commission.
Did you want a response just on the kind of functionality of a cycle track versus?
I'm just curious as to, where that commission weighs in on a project like this. I mean, they're members in the user group, but all these other projects, we have the whole commission weighing in.
I seem to recall them weighing in when we did the CDO and other things
Yeah.
when we first voted on this back in December 2022.
And part of the Athens in Motion, the program, the studies that were done, all the history stuff that was done, all that was folded into those project concepts.
Okay, so they took the recommendations from the beginning of the concept?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Carol?
Yeah, I just need a little history reminder here. This is starting, the project one is starting at Skyline Drive. Can you remind me why it's starting there? That's where the sidewalk ends?
Yes, ma'am.
Sidewalk ends there.
But there's some sidewalk on the other side at different places, but that's where the sidewalk ends here.
When we presented the project concept, one of the things that y'all asked us to do, due to money consideration, was
Okay.
to leave any existing facilities there
Right.
unless it was degraded to a state that it was a safety hazard or we needed to replace it. And so we were trying to honor that. So most of the sidewalk there to Skyland Drive is in good shape. So we picked up from Skyland based on the CDO and moved that forward towards the intersection at the loop and then the loop down to Rhodes Drive.
And there's also sidewalk then from Epps Bridge up to Atlanta Highway as well? Oh, great. Thanks for the reminder.
John?
How wide is the existing sidewalk? You said that North Skyline's
On
tiny.
which, on Timothy?
Yeah.
It's about a 5-foot sidewalk.
And I think that there was a discussion at the time about just adding more sidewalk, and I'd have to go look, but I think the CDO talked about a multi-use path at the
It
time.
did.
Yeah,
It
okay.
did, that's right. Yeah, the sidewalk was a consideration, but I think it was anticipated that wouldn't provide the breadth of usability as multi-use path.
And I think the sentiment at the time was, well, if we're gonna do all this work, let's just go ahead and make it where it's more versatile as
That's
far
right.
as, yeah.
To Derek's point about just mobilizing the crew and the equipment in the first place.
And the shared use path is definitely if you want to make a bike pedestrian corridor in this area, it is definitely the most cost-effective measure, what we've shown today.
Thanks, Derek. Yeah,
All right.
good long time.
And for what it's worth, I've been in Atlanta a lot lately, just with kid things. And particularly in Decatur, you're seeing them retrofit a lot of neighborhoods with a multi-use path, which is really interesting to see how they're trying to navigate smaller. So this is something that I think cities are really investing in, so.
All right, thanks a bunch. We've
Well,
got
thank y'all for
the,
that, not letting Michael get too nervous. I
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Great,
I
you
appreciate
did
it.
fine.
On his
You did
first
fine.
I was
Thank you
glad to
very
see you
much.
didn't read through those engineering slides.
I noticed when he pulled you up, well, Derek will answer that.
Sounds like.
It's all good stuff.
all right, we're gonna stay in the bike and pedestrian world, and we've got some bike and pedestrian improvement program opportunities that Ronnie and Stephen from Public Works are gonna present. And I'm excited about this because it provides us an opportunity to do some of the more global fixes that I think probably every one of us recognize we need in neighborhoods where we live or represent.
Do the shared use. It's a shared path, so.
All right. Steve and Ronnie, thanks for coming.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm here alongside with Daniel Sizemore, Stephen Bailey, and our Athens in Motion Commission members, Randy, Teresa, and Lauren. Good evening, everyone, again. And so I am here tonight with this great team to present to you Transportation and Public Works Department recommended bike and pedestrian improvement programs that staff has developed with the assistance of Athens in Motion Commission and several community members. So in response to feedback from community stakeholders and in order to be prudent with limited resources, staff has worked with Athens in Motion with this great team and also the community at large with the input that we got and the requests that we received. And we've come up with a number of programs and recommendations for low-cost, high-impact improvements that could be implemented over the life of SPLOST 2023. As you all know, the Athens in Motion Commission was selected as the user group for TSPLOST 2023, Project 25, Bike and Ped Program, and are acting in their appointed capacity as advisors to Athens in Motion regarding multimodal transportation projects, policies, and initiatives, while working directly with the staff at Transportation and Public Works. Tonight, we'll be talking about some history of the program, current projects, proposed programs, and next steps. And we will leave some time at the end for any questions that may come up. History, not diving too much into the old history, we'll start with the first. Athens in Motion approved the Bike and Ped Pedestrian Master Plan, branded Athens in Motion, in October 2018. Along with that approval came approval of projects to move forward into concept phase. After accepting the plan, the bike, ped, and safety coordinator position was created. In June of 2019, Mayor and Commission passed a resolution to create Athens in Motion Commission as an oversight committee for bike and pedestrian-related projects within Transportation and Public Works. Lastly, in May, as you all know, we got the TSPLOST project, and that moved forward, as you all know it. Now, as I mentioned previously, the Mayor and Commission approved multiple projects at the time they approved, you all have approved the Athens in Motion plan. The 5 project concepts that moved into implementation, one of them was King Avenue. The sidewalk was built and completed shortly after the plan was adopted. Cherokee, Riverbend, Jefferson, and Barber Street are all of these projects have passed the concept level and are in various stages of preliminary engineering. Now, preliminary engineering takes a long time, especially on a large project. And if you all remember, with each of those projects, we went back and forth with public engagement at multiple levels, providing multiple alternatives for sidewalks, multi-use path, and so on. I also want to remind you that Cherokee Road at the moment does not have construction funding. It was approved to go into design only.
So on that one, all of the other ones, Riverbend, Jefferson, and Barber Street, the first one's done, but Riverbend, Jefferson, and Barber, there's money to complete and construct those projects.
Yes.
Okay, but there's not for the Cherokee Road one, that was just for the preliminary engineer, no, that was, yeah. Yeah, okay, got it, exactly what that asterisk says.
And just a funding note on Cherokee. Cherokee is, of course, in the Lexington Road TAD area.
Yeah.
And when this project was conceptualized, it was contemplated that TAD dollars that accumulated
I remember
could fund
that.
this, and the commission could affirmatively decide to spend TAD dollars on that project. That would be a recommendation I would make. So it's something that you might want to hang on to, and we can continue that conversation at a future date.
All right. Well, that being said, we felt strongly about the need for innovative thinking. The fact that these big projects are taking a long time to deliver. At the meantime, we are aware of local needs, smaller projects that may be completed much faster than a larger project. With that, I'm gonna turn it over to Daniel, who's gonna talk to us about what these programs are.
So after extensive staff and Athens in Motion Commission discussions, these 6 programs were identified as having quick delivery or response times and would include only projects that can feasibly be accomplished with limited resources. So the programs include sidewalk gaps, bike lane gaps, ADA improvements, pilot projects, complete streets implementation through lane reallocations, and grant matching funds. So for sidewalk gaps, we'll start here. There's currently no funding mechanism for filling in small sidewalk gaps throughout the county. Yet this is one of our most common pieces of feedback when we talk with people in the community. I'm sure you guys hear it too. Filling in small gaps would lead to large connectivity impacts for pedestrians who are walking to schools, work, or other important destinations. We've talked internally with our staff, and we've indicated, staff has indicated an ability to complete approximately 4 in-house sidewalk gap projects per year, the average of those being around $50,000 per project. So we could look at potentially $1 million to go towards this from the main bucket. Similar to sidewalk gaps, there is also currently no funding mechanisms for small bike lane gaps throughout the county. You may recognize these signs, bike lane ends, and this is usually a point where the bike kind of comes over into the road, and people are sometimes a little more confused. So I'll highlight this is also within our existing network that we're wanting to fill in the bike lane gaps. We're not looking at, big capital bike lane projects like we've been discussing with our capital projects. So this is one of the most commented issues within our bike network from advocates and bike users and students, really at any of our tabling opportunities. We've heard a lot of feedback from various tabling things that the Athens in Motion Commission and staff have done. So many have felt community members have told us that they would feel more comfortable biking and walking, and if they felt more comfortable biking and walking, they would be driving less. So filling in these smaller bike infrastructure gaps could lead to multiple miles of additional connectivity for residents who rely on bicycling as their primary mode of transportation. So staff have the ability to implement about 2 projects per year over the course of the next 5 years.
Daniel, can I ask you a question on this so I can understand this concept? If I looked in the Athens in Motion, which I pulled up, but I'm not getting to the zooming in on it, would it show this area from here, that's right before you get to Bishop Park, isn't it, right there? All the way down to, to the loop, to, if you go across Hawthorne and down there, would it show that as a project? And what's and if so, how is this gap connected to that project?
Absolutely. So there is a project on Oglethorpe that goes from, I believe, Prince Avenue all the way down to Mitchell Bridge Road. It may be split into 2 segments. I'd have to double check the plan. But in the Athens in Motion plan, this is actually recommended to be a buffered bike facility, and that is kind of a corridor-wide improvement. Now, it does also mention that it is a existing bike lane in our current inventory. This is all listed as having bike lanes, but there are sections within our bike lane roads that are just sharrows.
Like this.
And this is one of those spots where, if you actually look a little further, what is happening here is when this was delineated as bike lanes, the need for a turn lane up at Sunset was retained. And so they didn't do any road widening to allow for the bike lane to continue. So the road actually splits into through lane with the center turn lane. And then I believe the bike lane picks up once you've made it through Oglethorpe Avenue, or once you made it through Hawthorne Avenue intersection, around where the firehouse is.
So on the GAP project, what would you get? I mean, in this, would you just go out there and draw the line, make it a little narrow?
So similarly to what we did with the Oglethorpe and Hawthorne Avenue intersection, where we've added in just delineated bike lanes, we're not fully adding in the recommended Athens in Motion proposed project bike facilities with that intersection improvement. We're just trying to get it up to the current standard. The goal with the bike lane gaps would be to really look at, for the instance with this particular one, we'd look at right here where this bike lane ends and then where the project scope for that intersection improvement ends, and we would identify ways that we could get some bike lanes on the ground. Now that might be that we need to move the curb out. It might be, in some spots, it might be, do we need this center turn lane? Rock Springs is another example that gets brought up a lot, where there's a turn lane at the bottom of the hill in Rock Springs, and that was there because the buses used to come into the back of the school, the high school. But the buses don't use that entrance anymore, and so looking at the actual volumes of people needing to make that turn, if we did that study today, it wouldn't be warranted for a turn. But when we do those projects in the past, it's not built into our policy for 3-laning, where we would say, or a road diet policy, where we would actually explore that. So the goal here is to essentially identify locations where, we can find areas where the bike lane ends, and we can try to find the cheapest alternative that, helps create the connectivity without, impacting the traffic, or.
And without spending like $4 million on.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we might get into some curb moving, it might get into some stormwater stuff, it really depends on the specific thing. The goal with this program would be, we could actually get an inventory of this and identify project concept lists. And I'll get into the details of like kind of next steps once we get through all 6 of these.
I have a quick
Melissa on
comment.
this.
Yeah, so would this be a place where you might consider like hopping up onto a shared use path, widening that sidewalk into a shared use path in order to continue that bike facility?
Absolutely, yeah. So we would look at different options, and so, we'd explore how much right-of-way is available at this location. We would identify, is there an advantage of building a raised sidewalk alongside and then using the sidewalk as a bike lane? Like, what is available, what are the options, and how can we try to do it affordably, but give that safe connectivity? So that's absolutely something that we've discussed, and in some cases, tear out the sidewalk, put in a multi-use path, if that's kind of what ends up.
Yeah.
It depends on the
I
infrastructure.
mean, this is exactly where I move out of the bike lane and onto the sidewalk on my scooter.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of cyclists who aren't totally confident taking the lane do the same thing. And, I see people all the time biking on the sidewalk, and I think the most important part with that is just making sure that if you're coming up to a crossing where there's a road, making sure you stop and know that you're probably not being seen, because that's the biggest
Yeah.
danger
And
riding
checking
on
the
the
driveways.
sidewalk is,
Yeah.
driveways and roads. All right, our third program is ADA improvements. So the newly passed federal PROAG, which is Public Right-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines, those requirements mandate the removal of ADA barriers with all basically transportation projects. That is going to now be, it has been a priority for us, but it'll be an ongoing priority for TPW. So based on we did a pilot trip hazard program west of downtown where Georgia Safe Sidewalks came in and ground down ADA barriers. And that was really helpful to even just get the data collection and get those trip hazards ground down. So based on that, we could kind of either expand out in that direction, or really there's just so many barriers. You can see here's a pretty new looking sidewalk, and where they actually cut into the sidewalk to put a new power pole in. This is along Lumpkin Street. And if you're in a wheelchair, that's really hard to navigate. The goal here is identify barriers, do the data collection, and then kind of talk to the disability advocates to make sure that we're addressing the highest need. And so our 5-year goal is to identify and fix high priority trip hazards across the full sidewalk network of existing sidewalks. And then this program would identify those barriers and put funding as available towards removing them.
Allison?
Yeah, this is a great example for what you're talking about. And I wonder, I don't think we're going to solve it tonight, but, when the state let the utilities come in and do as they may in our right-of-way, this is what happens. They get a permit, but yet we don't get any voice as to that, and the way that they're, cutting up the sidewalks now to get to underground optic cable and stuff. So would we be able to get utility help by kind of enforcing, speaking of being the ADA advocates, like we would help
I'm just the
guy. Yeah, we would be able to be that advocate for the ADA compliance to who put this pole in, is what I'm getting at.
Well, I think there are franchise agreements that govern prior rights of where poles are, where they're located in the future. And as a matter of fact, Mayor just said, hey, want to get that back out and look at it. I mean, they're within their rights to do this right now, I think, per the franchise agreement. We'll certainly check on this and others. As far as the other utilities and the poles that are being put in, you're right. They, and we went through this a few years ago, but we do have an agreement that we have signed with most of the major cable providers that provides some parameters for how and where and a preference to co-locate on existing. So we have been proactive about it, but there are existing agreements that do, I think, outline what the parameters are.
Right, and I realize, I sent it in as a work request, that there's hundreds of these permits out right now. So the public needs to share areas because there's not enough inspectors to make sure they've been patched to our quality level versus making another tripping hazard.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're dead on, Commissioner. And before I turn it over to Ronnie, the phenomena that you just looked at right here, so what's most likely happening is the power company said, okay, we're putting a new pole in, and so they look like they're trying to mitigate this, but there are other utilities that are hanging on the old pole, and until those relocate the old utilities, then the pole stays. And to the average resident, they're like, this doesn't make any sense at all. But it's a time issue, and then we're sort of at bay and dependent on those utilities to come back and clean up their utilities and allow Georgia Power to remove the pole. But Ronnie?
Blaine, I mean, there's nothing to be added here. Blaine got it, just the whole story, so thank you. Now, would this program help with our utility coordination? Yes, because we will have an inventory where these things are. And are they to the extreme where it doesn't meet ADA, or is just an obstacle in the way that we don't like to see it in the sidewalk? Because ADA is not 5 feet, ADA is less than that. So if the power pole is on the side of the sidewalk, not a big deal. But we don't like, to see both poles sitting there for 3-4 years, and that's something we're working on. We have staff, and you may see requests for additional resources, staff, and so on, to be able to oversee those 200 permits for utilities only at this point. That's not land development, it's just utilities.
No, I get it, and you can see where there's some poles, I saw one recently, there was a cutoff pole hanging, but waiting for the utility that's responsible for the wires to put it to the new pole, and at the end of my driveway, I'm waiting for the old pole to be vacated, so that then we wait for the pole removing people to come and take them out. Yep. Well, thank you for that, because this is very important.
Alyssa?
Yeah, in addition to these poles in the middle of the sidewalk, there's also poles that are so far off the sidewalk that you have to kind of navigate some rocky terrain or a muddy slope to get at the pole to push the signal button. And so, and that's certainly an ADA access.
And one of the things in ProAg is there is now, those push buttons have to be within a certain distance of the crosswalk. I believe it's somewhere between 5 and 10 feet.
Yeah.
So we will actually have to, when we're doing these road upgrades, we'll have to put in push buttons that are probably standalone from the control pole.
I mean, they're up and down Prince Avenue, there's one at Pulaski.
Prince and Finley is a great example of that.
Hancock.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that one actually probably needs stepping stones to get across the gully that's washed out there.
I mean, I notice it because I do hop up on the sidewalk on my scooter, and I think about what someone who was in a wheelchair might have to navigate. I mean, I literally pick my scooter up and move it to get over some of these.
Yeah, the most important part of what we've got here is that identify. So really the data collection, the comprehensive data collection across the county. It's pricey, but it goes towards really building out. Like, you can't know what all needs to be done until you have that inventory.
Patrick, you had your hand up.
No, Commissioner Wright asked all the questions, but for not ProAg, once the utilities move the poles, are we responsible for filling in the holes, or do they fix do they finish the sidewalk?
They are responsible for that. Now, the franchise agreement is the mechanism that makes them responsible. There is some gaps. The franchise agreement for one company is not in details to say, yeah, you have to replace or to fix, and to what extent you go. So all that, if we ever revisit those franchise agreements with one of the oldest utilities in town, we will definitely look at those to make sure that they are, repairing their work according to federal law, which requires them to upgrade things. If they have messed up an old ramp, they have to bring up this ramp to a new standard. Currently, the franchise agreement doesn't say that, for example.
Mike?
Sure, I'll be real quick, Mayor. And not only telephone poles, but if you go along any stretch of Village Avenue, and I've mentioned this to Manager Webbs, and we're looking into it, but certainly the highest one that's very visible is along Cloverhurst and Village Avenue. Standing water just sits there from either a rain or some people watering the lawns or whatever the reason, it shouldn't still be sitting there like 2 weeks later after. And that's what's happening. And what's happening is it's covering up the ramp so that it's creating an accessibility issue for folks that are either going out to Millage Avenue, which is not safe, or having to not use the ramp if you're older or have some mobility issues. So I don't know who's responsible for looking into that part, but it's not only on Cloverhurst, but you can ride down Millage and see some other examples as well.
And Commissioner Hammy, last Friday, I think following up for your constituents, you shared that complaint with me, and of course we had a holiday yesterday, but Ronnie had responded today, and Ronnie, you might share what has caused that and what we're doing about it.
Sure. I happened to stop by there today, so I dropped by there. I saw it, but today I stopped by just to take a look and just to confirm. Yes, so the paving actually caused the issue. They lifted up the new paving, so it's holding water back into our lower areas. Typically, contractors are responsible for this. Now, this is a GDOT contractor. We've contacted GDOT. Originally, once you brought this to our attention, we contacted them about 3-4 weeks ago. And then now, just on Friday, we also contacted them, and we contacted their maintenance, not just their construction section here in town, but also their maintenance crews, so to let them know that the water is being held specifically on Cloverhurst intersection.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
I've noticed.
it happens, and it happens, and the contractors come back and do some correction work.
I've noticed examples where a GDOT contractor will repave in a manner such that the crown of the road is higher than the sidewalk, and the taper is either at the level or slightly above the sidewalk, and so the sidewalk becomes almost the ditch.
Have they given any, and not to get off subject here, but have they given any indication about when they're going to come?
No,
fix
sir.
it?
And as soon as we get that indication from them, we will let you know. We haven't gotten indication from them. Now they're still working on their markings, so the contractor
Yeah.
hasn't left.
Yeah.
They haven't finished their markings yet.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Pilot projects. So with pilot projects, we are aiming to do approximately one smaller pilot project a year for 5 years. So this would allow staff to test out various safety improvements that are recommended by FHWA and GDOT. And these would be located on our locally owned street network. Here's a really great example of some bulb outs that were done. You can do that in high traffic areas to really make sure that vehicles are slowing down as they turn, to make sure they're not like turning into a pedestrian who's crossing. It also allows for pedestrians to step a little further out. So we have some upcoming smaller pilot projects that are paid for out of some of our other budgets that, those should be coming on the ground pretty soon. But here's a really great example of you can do this around schools. You can do some pilot projects around bus stops and crosswalks there. But really we're just trying to make sure we're able to test the innovative solutions and then really evaluate their impact before we then roll those out onto our larger roadways. And then complete streets implementation. So many of our roads were built or widened based on models and future projections of car volumes. Over time, for varying reasons, those models are not always accurate. So complete streets funds allow us to identify locations where we could reallocate lanes into a safer configuration as those roads are repaved. We already do this, and we usually bring those forward as individual projects. This would give us kind of a bucket of money to to work with on those repaving projects. The goal here is to create that more balanced transportation network. So, as more cars get on the road, congestion continues to worsen. And one very effective way of reducing congestion is by encouraging mode shift, which means increasing opportunities for people to utilize alternate modes of transportation. So it's important to note that our goal is not to get everyone to walk or bike everywhere. We know that cars are important. I used one to get here today. The goal here is to give safe transportation options for those who want to use those options or those that fully depend on them for various reasons. So the goal here is 1 to 2 smaller projects per year for the next 5 years. And yeah. Then grant matching funds is the last program. We are trying to optimize the opportunity to take advantage of external funding sources. You've seen all of our grants come before you recently. We've been able to capitalize on kind of some matching costs. So far, we haven't had to actually have matching funds set aside, but this would do that in case we need to have some matching funds. So it just makes it a little more able to be put forward to a grant. So we'd like to set aside around $250,000 of the TSPLOST dollars for local match to any federal grants that we may receive that further our safety and connectivity goals. So
I have a quick question. So this is coming forward for us to approve setting that money aside to be future matching, because right now that option is not there without us saying so?
So more what we're doing today is we're discussing the ways that we could utilize the project, the TSPLOST program, to go towards these different programs. And so we're not doing a vote per se, but you want to go ahead?
Sure. So typically, historically, and looking at all programs, when we start looking to prioritize within a program, we believe like we got a set of projects because the bucket of funding in 2023 is specific to the Athens in Motion, to continue Athens in Motion effort. And while we do have a project that doesn't have construction funding, we also realize there are needs across the board, that the small sidewalk gaps, the small bike gaps, and so on, and all these programs. This work session is to let you know we've been thinking about it, we're going to move forward and start looking at prioritization and prioritizing those projects. And these are the, if you may want to call them sub-programs. So there's no agenda item coming forward to you. We're just letting you know this is the thinking. This is where Athens in Motion, this is where staff feel like this project funding, based on the project description, we should be. We should be working on these needs. Because while a large project like Barber Street in the $8 million, or Chase Street in the $11 million nowadays, and as so on, with $8 million, we probably can fund one more project. In the meantime, we've heard the community. There are so many needs for gap projects. And we hear a lot about sidewalks, but there's other things that we need to be looking at. ADA, like Daniel said, this is something just was passed, and now we are expected to comply with every project. The complete street implementation, we've been doing that. Every year we'll bring to you a list of roads to be paved, and we identify which roads may use a roadway diet, right? With this process, we're letting you know, we're not gonna look a year by year. We're gonna look at the county. We're gonna look at the entire county and identify which roads need or can utilize such road diet and can qualify. Having prioritization can identify funding, can help us staff to put our resources where you want them to be. So next time you see us talking about these, you will see a criteria and you will see a ranked list of projects, and we'll present those to you in a work session, and following that there will be a concept approval. So right now we're just letting you know that in the background that's what staff in Athens in Motion will be working on.
At the same time as the next slide being a revised master revision of the plan. So we're all coming together here.
All of it.
We're merging
Moving along.
safely here, okay.
Yeah, we're like a train. Got to keep it moving. With the
Well, if I could, Daniel,
yeah,
too.
absolutely.
I think on the grants, just knowing how to partition these funds, helps staff to determine what to go after. And some of the grants have long lead times and take some time to develop. And it wouldn't, of course, it's your prerogative, but for you to come while we were, hoping to access some grant funds, and then maybe there's one project and y'all use all the funds, it just gives us a sense of how to spend it going forward.
Carol?
Following up on that, looking at that next slide, which I hadn't seen before I had this in my head, was, the Athens in Motion plan is not just a list of projects. There are chapters in there with a lot of verbiage and explanation and policy. So I'm assuming in that revision that these, what you're showing us here would be incorporated into some chapter in the newly revised Athens in Motion. Is that correct?
All of these items are actually already in the plan, in certain areas, in goals, objectives, success measures.
Right.
And so each of these have been kind of put together as programs by recommendation from the Athens in Motion
Right.
plan.
And I remember when we brought that when I was on the other side of the rail and the plan came up and it had those 5 projects. It was set as like, here are 5 big projects, spend all the money on this. And there wasn't money for these other things. So now you're saying, hey, listen, we want to be able to have a process to use money for these other projects. And how much money do we have left in the TSPLOST program for 2023?
Secret slide? Or do
We do have a secret
Secret slide?
Can we
Because, as we did not want to approve budget or follow this presentation with an agenda with budget approval.
Yeah.
We put together some numbers to just let you know what are we thinking, with all these 6 projects, what are we thinking? And how much money is left over to support a large capital project. That is coming, and it would be towards the end. And like I said, because we're not asking for you to approve a budget, but we want to let you know our thought, where we think this would land.
Yeah, let's go ahead and finish out the presentation. I think there's 2 or 3 more slides, and then we'll go straight into that question. How about that?
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay. So as we've done over the past 5 years, since the inception of the Athens in Motion plan, we'll continue prioritizing delivering capital projects with the remaining funds. So next steps are we are beginning to collect the relevant data, and we'll begin development of each of these programs, focusing on one of them at a time. The process will include coordinating with outside groups that are relevant based on the program needs, and we'll use findings from those meetings to develop prioritization criteria. So then staff will champion the development of these programs, and Athens in Motion Commission will help with outreach, engagement, and recommendations that'll be brought to the body. So a project concept list will be generated based on constraints for the programs on the project-based programs. I'll go ahead and say that because the grant one won't necessarily have a project concept list. But that project concept list will be generated based on the constraints, and then those will be prioritized and presented to the Mayor Commission at future work sessions. So now, thanks for your time tonight. We have room for questions. We've been answering them. Let's go ahead and jump straight into the budget.
No, the secret slide.
So what you can see here is the project funds. So we have SPLOST 2011 Project 6, TSPLOST 2018 Project 11 and 12, and then 2023 Project 25. The project funds, those are the total funds in each of those projects, with the total off to the right. The expense that are encumbered is what has already been spent out or is encumbered. And then we have the designated for current projects. So here's where you can see Barber Street, Jefferson River Road. You can see Cherokee Road right now has 0. And then future sub-projects and contingency, all of that is designated currently. So what's in yellow now is the remaining funds that are available within these programs. And the proposed programs that we've brought to you tonight, you can see they're all listed under the project number 25, TSPLOST 2023, and that's based on the project description for Project 25, included not just the implementation of this plan, but also the added goals of connectivity and accessibility and safety. That leaves so that's 3.48 million roughly based on some percentages that we did for proposed programs that we brought to you. And then the future tier 1 capital projects, it leaves another 8.12 million for those future reprioritized tier 1 capital projects. Does that answer your?
It does, and then it also sets up that program for next TSPLOST. Right.
Or other sources of funding as they come available.
Right.
Yep.
All right, any questions?
So the future tier 1 capital projects, those monies can be reallocated. can be readjusted, correct?
In what way? Like, the future Tier 1 capital projects, so the future Tier 1 projects, like if you look through our list of Tier 1 projects right now in the Athens in Motion plan, that list, some things may stay the same, but we're redoing the criteria. We are looking at the proposed network overall. Like, we're really digging in to see like what improvements can we make. Like, they did a fantastic job in 2017, 2018 when that was passed, and we just want to build on that with the additional data that we have these days, the staffing that we have now. We didn't have that back then. So we're going to really build on that plan, expand it, and then come up with our newly prioritized Tier 1 projects. And this project, the project number 25, as well as the other ones that are listed here, those all kind of in their project descriptions point to these 4 programs are for the implementation of the Athens in Motion plan.
If I could, Mayor.
Please.
I think Commissioner Myers hit on a very important point for us all to think about. And so, we are given access to TSPLOST through the grace of the voters each year. Those are 5-year cycles. And, SPLOST doesn't really allow you to spend all of a project money on design. And what the flow of that we find ourselves in is that it gets passed, and then it takes some time to get it designed, and then towards the end of the project, you start seeing the benefits of that. I say that to say that we don't suggest changing anything differently, but if we begin thinking in these 5-year cycles, that, to your point, that maybe there's a couple that we didn't have enough money to actually build them, but we did to design them, then those can happen perhaps earlier in the next program. And so if we start piecing that together, we can have a continuous flow as opposed to what are we doing this 5 years, and then we start all over and we've got a couple of years that are a little fallow. So that's not part of this presentation, but if we begin thinking about project management and flow, and I know that you all have said to me, we want to show the voters that they can trust us and that we're getting these things put on the ground just like they voted on as quickly as possible. So I think if we start thinking about that, I wouldn't mourn Cherokee Road. It's just, it'll be up perhaps as a continuation project if y'all approve that and if the voters approve it.
Carol?
On that revision, are you gonna, with the projects, can you identify which ones are in TADS as well? That would be helpful to know.
Like
So
as a
that-
prioritization point or just as an identification?
No, as identification, so if one is looking at them, one could be saying, oh, look, that's a good one we could use a TAD for, because it's hard. We got silos here, we got TADs here, this here, but that would be good to know. I mean, I'd like the districts too, but I know you don't like to put those in these, but,
I was just going to say, on a chart like this, which is a budget chart, but I mean, we could add a column that says, TAD eligible and put a check mark by certain
Yeah,
projects.
I'm just thinking about in those charts of all the Tier 1 projects, so that when
Sorry.
one is looking at them, or Tier 2, that would just be something that was in that chart.
I have that as, and I have a database of, once I took the Athens in Motion plan, kind of digitized it, and I built this big database, because that's what my brain does. But I have a field for TADs, just because it's helpful for me to know all of the funding opportunities.
The only one here is the Cherokee Road, right?
Part of Barber.
Part of
Yeah,
Barber.
Barbara.
Okay.
And I've been encouraging staff to kind of have a systemic way to shepherd recommendations through the TAD resident committees to us for these kind of projects. I mean, certainly, conceptually, that was a big motivator for setting up the program in the first place.
Great. Any additional questions? Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thanks.
As we transition, a constituent reached out to me this week and complained that they can't hear very well what we're saying. Right, and so the directional mics, you got to get close to them. So just as y'all ask questions or give feedback for the benefit of the public, if you'll get in close.
We don't have to redo everything, right? You're just saying from,
Can you please repeat
yeah,
that whole thing?
you guys get back up to the podium.
We'll reenact the last 100 minutes for the good of all. All right, so next item is fire station number 5. We previously discussed this. This fire station is on our SPLOST 2020 project list. And Daniel Guerin is going to begin to take us through this.
There we go. Good afternoon, you all. Mayor, Commission. My name's Daniel Guerin, the SPLOST project manager for this. Also today we have Chief Jeff Scarborough and possibly Assistant Planning Director Bruce Lonnie. But today, what I'm going to bring forward to you is the Fire Station number 5 Site Selection Committee's recommendation for candidate sites. What we'll do this afternoon is we'll review the information and that was given to the Site Selection Committee by staff, and they voted to select these proposed candidate sites to bring forth from Mayor Commission for your review and recommendation, or your feedback, and in preparation for the next step, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Included in the agenda today is initial project statement, history, community engagement. I'll have the fire chief go through and talk about what fire services and emergency service will be here at this particular location, what the benefits are for bringing this fire station to this proposed locations, the proposed candidate site summary, public engagement results, the current budget, updated timeline, and then towards the end of the presentation, I'm not going to talk about those, but generally staff also provides the user group potential sites that were not recommended. That way that you've got some background on which sites weren't selected. Again, project statement. I won't go through the project history. What I will do is, since the last time we met with Mayor Commission, the last action that you had taken was to approve the site selection criteria itself, and that gives staff the opportunity to go through and select sites in this particular area using that criteria, evaluate them, come up, place them in a point system, and from there we went back to the Site Selection Committee, presented 8 recommended sites, and we went from there and sent that out for public input, went through the public input process from late June to all the way through the end of July. We came back to the Site Selection Committee with the user group's proposed potential candidate sites, and from there the Site Selection Committee is bringing forth the recommendation for those top 3 candidate sites. The public engagement, so the notification for public engagement was placed on various social media outlets and news outlets. We did hold 2 in-person public engagement meetings once on July 12th and then once on July 20th. It ranged between 50 and 70 attendance at each one of those. We did have an online survey which garnered 57 responses. So during those community engagement periods, the in-person public engagement periods, what we did was we collected all the statements and questions that were given by the residents themselves. We had collected that data and we put them into a document which we had given to Manager Williams, which distributed that out to Mayor Commission for review. But majority of the comments were negative concerning both fire services and community environment concerns. And what we did was we posted, what you see today is a summary of those comments And part of what we're going to cover through this presentation will address many of these concerns that the public had had. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Scarborough. He's going to talk about the fire emergency services that are provided at the station and also some of the community benefits of why it should be placed here.
So before I get into my presentation, real quick, I want to introduce Nate Moss, who will be our interim fire chief in 2 days. So he's taking on this task, and I wanted you to get a chance to see him and see his face. So
I'll be here to also answer questions.
thanks, Chief. So the services that are going to be provided from this fire station include, of course, fire extinguishment, homes that catch on fire, barns, grass fires, woods fires, vehicle fires, any kind of fire, of course. Next is the medical emergencies. That's 60% of our call volume now. That's what we're responding to every day, several times a day. And of course, that could be a heart attack, a stroke, a seizure. It could be any kind of medical emergency that we respond to. Of course, we do that because of our medical first responder license and our EMTs that we now have on staff. We also have services that are provided throughout the community, even though, like, our hazmat team won't be at this station, but that service is available across the community. So through our hazmat team, that will be available, of course, through this station too. We do missing person searches, a vehicle crash extrication that's in the area over there, injury prevention, fire cause determination, trying to figure out why fires happen so we can try to prevent them. And then, of course, fire inspection and fire and life safety code enforcement. So this evening, as you guys think about this and what location is best for the service and for the safety of the community, I want to give you 3 blocks of time that are really important to the services we deliver. So the first block is when the call comes in the 911 center. So the question is, how quick do they answer and how fast can they process the call? And the standard is NFPA 1225. And the goal is to do all of that, answer the call and process it in 1 minute and 20 seconds. And that's pretty fast. Imagine somebody calling upset. They've got to calm them down and get information out of them. So that's 1 minute and 20 seconds. And then next, through our radio system, they dispatch us. And so we're getting on the truck, getting our gear on, getting ready to respond, and then we roll out. While we're doing that, now you're going to add on another 60 to 80 seconds. So now you're up to 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So we're now rolling to the call. So now here next, this next chunk of time is the biggest amount of time in our response, and it's travel time. And that's what this decision impacts tonight, is travel time. So, our goal is to add those 3 times together, the 911 call, us getting in the truck and started and on the scene. 6 minutes and 40 seconds is what we want to do. Now, that means everything went perfect. That means there was no rain, there was no bad weather, there was no traffic. So that's not likely to happen every time, but that's what we aim to try to do, and that's what the standards call for. Now, what's not included in that, just for the sake of thinking about that time, is when somebody decides to call 911. And what I mean by that is we have times where the house catches on fire, and they think, maybe I'll put it out. And so they try, and it gets bigger and bigger, and then they finally call us. So we're behind the 8 ball to start with because they didn't call us quickly. So that doesn't include the time, that time that goes into that. So why is that time important? And I think y'all already understand this, but with fires, it depends on the fuel load, the ventilation, the temperature even that day of how fast a fire can double. But it can double, depending on all those variables, it can double from every 30 seconds to every 120 seconds. It can grow really fast. So time's important. Remember I said medical emergencies are 60% of the calls we go on. Well, medical emergencies, time's valuable too. If you had serious trauma, you can bleed out in 5 minutes. That's serious trauma, but you can bleed out in 5 minutes. Time's important. if you're in cardiac arrest, for every minute that you don't have good CPR being performed on you, your survival rate drops from 7 to 10% for every minute. So the time to get on the scene is really important, and that's what this impacts this evening. One of the things that I heard in some of the input meetings was there was a phrase used called quality of life. And I believe this is about quality of life, because when you think about quality of life, if you look at most definitions, you know, they include safety, security, and health. That's quality of life. And so the largest block of our time in responding is that travel time. So this decision impacts that travel time for us responding. We've talked about this, the committee's talked about this, that this is a 50-year decision too. When we make this decision and we build the station, the community's going to live with it for 50 years. That's the average of what the life of our stations are. This impacts 15,000 residents, which is about 12% of the population in Athens-Clarke County. So it affects a lot of folks here in the community. So that station right now responds to 3 to 4 emergencies a day, and that's over the past 2 years. So the call volume is not extreme in that area right now. And what that means is we have margin for responses, that we have resources available. And currently, with the location of Station 7 and 5, there's overlap with these two stations, because Station 5 is a very old station. Station 7 it's property that was donated by UGA next to the vet school over there. So, you know, that's one of the reasons it's at that location. But they overlap, like 40 to 50% of the coverage area overlaps. And that's not effective use of our resources. And it limits that, it lengthens some of that travel time because they're not far enough apart. And so what the committee's recommending to you, what the committee is recommending to you guys is that we move them apart. Now, we're not trying to create a big gap, but they're just too close right now. And so just for point of reference, here are some examples of, because this was on the table too, and we've heard some of this, if we stayed in the same location and we didn't move versus the new location, which, and I'm referencing Morton Road and Lexington Road, that intersection right there, but what they're recommending is close to the intersection, the properties they've recommended. So let me give you an example. So 395 Millstone Circle. So our current fire station location, that's 3.5 miles, and using the distance and the speed limit for the road, that's going to be 7 minutes for us to get there. Our proposed area at that crossroads, it's 1.2 miles, 3 minutes. That's a significant difference. 245 Morris Way, 3.9 miles, 7-minute travel time. The proposed area, 1.7 miles, 3 minutes again. 52 Thompson Farm Road, 3.7 miles, 8-minute travel time. 1.5 miles, 4-minute travel time. It cuts the travel time in half. So, and I've got some other examples, but I don't want to keep beating that down. There's a significant difference in where the station sits right now in that area versus this new area. And it's very impactful for our ability to quickly respond and handle the emergency, whatever it is, whether it's a medical emergency, a fire, or whatever it is. So it's very impactful on our service delivery and our ability to quickly get there with our travel time.
Thank you, Chief. One or two other things I want to add to that is there were some responses from the residents about why do we not keep the current station where it's at, because there's a larger population density in that particular area. Well, one of the things that Athens has right now is an ISO rating of 1. And part of maintaining that is making sure that we have adequate coverage across the county and also equal coverage to all the residents across the county. So one of the things that the proposed location does is increases that coverage base across Athens and reduces some of that coverage gap But I want to explain something is that ISO rating, they judge it based on area of coverage and not population density itself. What I wanted to show you here is the 2.5 mile radius between Station 5 and Station 7. Like the chief said, there's approximately 50% overlap of coverage currently. And in the proposed location, the 3 dots that you see there are the proposed locations that I'll show you here in just a second. Kind of shows where that area shifts, increases the coverage area on that southeast side. So the first recommended candidate site, and then, these aren't ranked from highest to lowest. They're just, there's no particular order in this, but this one is located on 1185 Morton Road, which is just south of that old Lexington Road, Morton Road intersection. And this particular parcel, the area that we're focusing on is 2.5 to 4.5 acre spot of an existing 48.9 acre parcel. It's flat, it's undeveloped, there's no existing structures, there's no trees. It does have water, electricity, internet. We will have to put septic on these areas because public sewer isn't provided, which we knew that going into it, but it does have the available area to put the septic. It does provide good site visibility from the road. It is on a collector road, which is nice because it allows the fire station to easily access Lexington Road, but go north and south, east and west fairly quickly on those collector roads that are at that particular intersection. It does have a good road distance or sight distance from the road, meaning that if there is oncoming traffic in either direction, the firefighter that are pulling out has good visibility of the traffic going both ways. So they're able to safely pull out onto Morton Road. This one is fairly similar. It is actually on the opposite side of Morton Road, just a little further north. This is 0 Morton Road. It is, again, we're looking at needing 2.5 to 4.5 acres of an existing 30-acre parcel. It is flat, undeveloped, doesn't have any trees. We would have to allow for a section of property, as you see on the north side of the red block, to remain with that existing owner, so that property isn't landlocked and they do have access to get behind there. Again, more or less the same features of site visitability, road visitability, and it does have access to the utilities. Yes, ma'am?
Can I ask a quick question, just because I love visuals and I get caught up in the details? So at the top here, it says it's the recommended site number 2, but yet the number in the map says it's the number 3. Am I the only one that gets confused by that?
Yeah, and that's, so when we originally put the map together, it was 1 through 8.
Okay.
And then when we did the slides, this is like the first slide, the second slide, the third slide. So
Okay.
Again, there's no particular order, and you're right, it doesn't make sense, but
Now it
that
does.
number does not correlate with what's on the map.
Yeah, well, now it does, though. And then I thought that the scoring was helping us prioritize, but you're saying the 52 that this has and the 52 from the other one, and the next one's got a score of 46.
Yep.
You're saying that's not a ranking that we should be harnessing?
Okay, so when we did what we did was that scoring came into play when we selected the top 8 proposed sites, and that's what we brought forth to the site selection committee. So
Okay.
those particular, the scoring did play a role in selecting the top 8 properties. Now, when we sent those out to public input, and then the user group came back and made the recommendation of which of those top 3
Okay.
out of the 8 should go back to the site selection committee.
Okay.
We based it on public input and also the user group's input. So therefore, really the point system did not play a factor in that.
Okay, except for the earlier stage.
Except during the
earlier
proposed.
stage.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
I'm following you. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
And then the last one, this one is located at 488 Old Lexington Road. This is very, very close to that intersection, but currently there isn't in the area that we're looking at does not have a building or a structure on it. It does have fairly densely populated with trees. We're still looking at a 2.5 to 4.5 acres of a 27.6 acre parcel. The site does have all the necessary utilities, still has good station visibility from the road, still located on a collector road, has very good roadside distance for oncoming traffic. I will note that it is in the proximity of the transmission line, but it doesn't affect the location of where we're proposing where that station goes. I just wanted to point out that big pink line, that is where that transmission buffer is. The current budget for this project is just over $6 million, and for land acquisition is at $500,000. So we're making the recommendation of these candidate sites to Mayor Commission. If you approve, then what we would do is take those 3 sites and we would conduct studies, which would include doing a map of site logistics, showing stormwater retention, utilities, building schematics, and doing a conceptual site plan, and also some conceptual building estimates for the project. And then we would bring that forth to the site selection committee, and if they approve, we'll bring that back to Mayor Commission, hopefully in the spring of 2024.
Allison, you have follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I was hoping you were going to bring us one to us, but you're saying that there's a lot more to be done on these 3, and does that include finding out if it is the seller, the property owner is?
So generally at this stage, we don't contact the seller.
Okay.
Just because part of that was we want to make sure that there's no what's the word I'm saying? Trying to think of
Competition?
Well, it's not competition, but also it keeps the government and that property owner separated during this time of selecting the property. There's no favorites picked over one or the other because there's a deal, a deal between me or them. So there's no current negotiations between staff, the site selection committee, the user group, or the property owner themselves.
So we continue an objective analysis.
Yes,
So,
yes, sir.
so it continues to be vetted equally, but
Correct.
I would lean towards the ones that we don't have to take all the trees down, just for Patrick, who's on that committee, the same.
She's the site selection committee chair.
Yeah. I'm the chair of the site selection committee, so I've heard this a whole lot
I
here.
am so sorry, I had the wrong person.
Oh,
in
no.
that Committee.
Well,
you're both on it.
No, he's not on it, but he's on the Classic
Oh, the
Center,
other one.
actually.
Okay.
But he has a lot of insight as well.
Commissioner
because
Myers,
he
I'm
lives
leaning
in that
towards the
area.
one that doesn't have all the trees.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I will add here that there was, as you mentioned, there was a lot of, there were very robust citizen in public input sessions that went much beyond what I expected at when I was driving over to the first one. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of thought, and strong feelings on this. In terms of these 3 sites, I will say one of the things I asked at the last site selection committee was have the owners of these sites contacted the SPLOST office to withdraw those sites, and had others done that? Because, some of us, myself, had said, if you're living out here and you really don't want it, I'd be communicating to someone about this, because at the beginning, some of this was like, some of the feelings were like, oh, you're going to go take this away from me. And I was like, well, I don't think we're going there, and what I learned from Daniel is that there was 1 or 2 of the other sites of that had communicated, but these 3 sites hadn't, which was a little bit different from the feeling one got when one went to the first meeting, that everyone was going to pull out of these. I think the fire chief has done a really good job of explaining why the firehouse needs to be in that area. And my first reaction to this, as having heard this, was, the experts of the fire department and their analysis is what's going to be the deciding thing here. And so I've learned a lot during this process, and anyone of my colleagues who'd like to reach out to me about this individually can do that between now and when we'll, the agenda setting or the voting meeting, so.
Well, just one more thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Patrick's ahead of me, sorry.
Thank you, Myers, and thank you, staff. I do have to represent my constituents. I'm gonna do the best I can. I think all the residents on my side of town do understand the need for a fire station in that general area, but unequivocally, I would say 99%, 95% are opposed to it, and I agree with them. This is why it's important for our community to participate in the growth concept plans, because most of that area in my zone is AR, which is prime for development, prime for growth. But I could tell you that those 3 sites that are selected, that the landowner's going to say no. That land, Athens-Clarke County already owns a lot of land, and now we're going to take people's personal property that they make money off of. Most of that, if you look at the two sites on Morton, those are farmland and cattle. One of the biggest farm owners in Athens-Clarke County, and to put a fire station in that location, you're literally inhibiting this gentleman or his family, who's been here for generations, for years, for decades, the ability to continue to make decent amount of money. And I'm, of course, opposed to that. We do have Athens-Clarke County property that we do own, that we could put a fire station on. There's plenty of it, ACC-owned property, not within that particular vicinity, but in the area that, we think outside the box, we can potentially place a fire station. I do trust the expertise of our fire department. But these people, these are not newcomers on my side of town. These are folks who have been here for centuries, for decades. These are very prominent people who are staples in our community, who've given back. And there's a saying about the East Side that people don't move to the East Side just for the lower property. The lower cost of home. They move out there for that quality of life. They like that peace of quiet. They like that, the tranquility, the stars at night. Just like some people move in town for the bike lanes, for the walkability, and some people move to the west side because they want to be close to 316. There's that notion that people move out there because of the farmland, for the peace and quiet. And most of those people have been there for generations. These are not, like I said, these are not newcomers. So they moved out there because they want that peace and quiet. And, I love a fire station, but it's going to disrupt these people's quality of life. And that's something that we should take in great consideration, because everybody has their own audience or whatever, their own take of quality of life. But it's very, very valuable to the constituents in District 1 and District 3. But yeah, what else do I have? and even the scoring, if you look at the scoring, so I'm on the Judicial Site Selection Committee, most of the scoring that we did for the Eastside Library were over 80%. Most of the 3 sites selected here are less than 60. You know, if you was in school and you got less than 60, that's, you know, that's not passing. And, you know, just for me, I will be reaching out to the interim, and God bless the last 2 days of the current police chief, reaching out to 2 alternatives that some of the constituents have reached out to me. But the 3, I can guarantee you, the 3 sites that are selected are going to be no. These are profit-making properties. These are farmers. These are people who invested into the land, and I would hate to take their ability to make money off the tax rolls for a fire station. I know that sounds bad, but there are other alternatives that we can look into. Thank you.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, we've brought that up before, and that's why I asked about whether or not people had reached out to make that point clear. I mean, I actually didn't realize how much money was available for the sale of the land. And I know, I respect you, Commissioner Davenport, and I would hope that the people here would reach out to the SPLOST office if they're not interested. I do have the feeling among my peers that we're not a body that's going to vote for the use of eminent domain, and I don't think that we're in a situation like that. So if indeed none of those landowners are interested in selling, I really wish they would communicate with the staff concerning that. I also would encourage my peers to listen to the site selection meeting. I think it was that the last one or 2 ago?
The 2 one.
Where
Yes.
the fire chief just did a really good overview and explanation of the whole process, although I believe he did a great job tonight as well. I am convinced that whether or not it's the best place for the people who live there, in terms of the police chief, we have asked about other areas and whether those areas would work. So that's why I would say to look at those as well. And also, at this time, I'm kind of curious whether the feelings are as strong, and perhaps the constituents out there could also communicate, because I think the fire chief has done a real great job of explaining some of these things, and I'm not sure if that's gotten through and changed any minds out there or not, but I would love to hear if that has.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, so, in that vicinity is a private, I guess, memorial park to 9/11. I would think that property owner would be welcoming of a fire station in the neighborhood. I'm wondering and it's on right off of Morton Road. I mean, it's sad to me that people don't understand the value of having these services. And then, like the chief said, the vast majority of calls are people who are having heart attacks and strokes, and there's some equestrian facilities out there, and at least once a year you hear this devastating story of a horse barn that burns down and dozens of horses are lost. I hope the public will consider the value of having access to this, like, really most important basic service in close vicinity to their properties.
Chief, I don't know if you want to kind of weigh in just on more recent conversations.
If I could, addressing Commissioner Link as well as Commissioner Myers, their statements, providing a little history, the current fire station, number 5, is 50 years old next year. It was built in 1974, part of Clarke County Fire Department. Well, it took up to 20 years or more since Fire Station 7 was built after Fire Station 5 was in operation. Well, we know Fire Station 7 is tasked with also protecting the university. It's also overlapping with Station 5. It also heads towards Lexington Road. It heads towards Oconee Street, Peter Street. So Station 7's in a great location for Station 7. However, it's been 50 years since we've addressed the location of Station 5. And due to that fact, I'm like Commissioner Wright. I like visuals. I like to simplify things. We saw some maps up there earlier. I was thinking to myself, it's like two people on a couch or two people on a bed that both have a blanket. Well, they may start sharing 2 blankets beginning, as they go to sleep. But at some point in the night, someone's going to be tugging on a blanket. It's going to go in one direction or the other. Well, I don't want the people close to where Station 5 is covering for their feet to get cold. I don't want for them to realize that they're not getting what they need after the fact. Because as Chief eloquently put it, this is a 50-year plus decision that's needing to be made. And I am not in any way trying to imply that the folks that live there, that their opinions are not valid. I'm just trying to ask for everyone to consider the big picture, the long-term picture. We don't know what the geography of the area will be like in the next 10, 15, 20 years. We would assume that it's going to continue to be residential. That's kind of what we hope for. That's kind of the station design that we would love to go with. However, we're in the site selection process, so we're just trying to keep that in mind. It was brought out, as Commissioner Myers put it, a couple of times before very, very well by the fire chief, but I just wanted to echo the sentiment. Since he is leaving, I just wanted to echo the sentiment from a history standpoint of where we are, why we're having to make this decision now, and thank you for humoring me.
Thank you. Patrick.
I just want to say that I think the public has spoken. If you, at the July 12th and the one after the
20th.
July 20th meeting, the fire station number 7 was packed, full of people. The amount of emails I've received and phone calls, it is overwhelmingly opposing. So.
And I appreciate that very much, Commissioner, and I read every one of those comments and certainly knew many of the commenters. Some of them are longtime friends or colleagues. But when I think about the core responsibilities of a local government, safety provision really is the bottom line. And I've had the experience of having family members who live kind of much deeper into agricultural areas. I have an uncle who lives in Madison County, very close to the Elbert County line, and there's a fire station right around the corner from him in a much more thinly populated area. And change is difficult for people, but I would suggest that 18 months post-development of this project, it's going to have saved many lives within this zone. And so just ask for members of the public to understand that this is really a life-saving measure, despite the difficulty of seeing any kind of change from the status quo that people have experienced. And I certainly understand that, but this is going to be what we're here to do. Commissioner.
Yeah, I also want to point out that both Southeast Clarke Park and Athens Fairgrounds seem to be falling within this zone. And those are places where you would have large gatherings that if something were to go wrong in one of those, you'd be very grateful to have emergency services within just a couple minutes away.
Allison, Carol, Patrick.
I appreciate Commissioner Davenport sharing those details with us because it helps me understand the depth of history and confirmation of how we got to where we are. But this new fire station was also overwhelmingly voted on by the community for the funding in 2020 SPLOST as well. And I would hope that when this comes forward to us again, can we make sure that we have input? I thought that fire station selection was one of the things that the firefighters union had great experience in letting us know what they think about these things. Locate, if they have a preference for one of the 3. I didn't know that was one of the benefits I was told that we would get from that decision. If that's feedback that's part of the process or not.
It's not part of the process.
Okay. All right.
But let me say this to you. As a commissioner, you depend on many different sources of information to make your decisions. You have to make hard decisions, and I know part of it is your own internal compass. but your constituents, you have to listen to all of the voters of Athens-Clarke County. You're a district representative, but you represent everybody. And I mean, certainly I would see the firefighters as a resource. I mean, the union is, the purpose of the union is there for collective bargaining purposes. It is not part of the approved project delivery process. But, whoever you seek opinions from, really, I think, is your prerogative.
Thank you.
Carol?
Yeah, I did want to point out that at the 2 public comment sessions, the fire department kept very quiet and did not give the kind of presentation that I subsequently got at the site selection meeting. And I think that the SPLOST office, we were all not prepared for the public, the public spirit on this topic. And I'm wondering if it might help the residents out there to be able to get that information from the police, from the fire department itself, the fire chief or the temporary or interim fire chief as we're moving forward, because I felt that presentation, just some of the information we were given tonight on the times, some of the kind of, I think one of the points being made about 60% of the calls being medical was not really highlighted there was a lot of emotion shared from the participants. So it was more coming from the people who lived out there, and there wasn't a presentation that was made as informatively as it could be to the residents out in that area from the fire department.
Patrick, I'm going to let you have the last word before
Last
we move
word,
on to the
yeah.
last item of the night.
So if you go online to our YouTube page, the August 12th SPLOST project number 6 was where Chief Scarborough gave a really good example as to why it needs to be out there. So I think it's August 12th, SPLOST project number 6. Check that out on YouTube. But is there any way that Blaine or Dr. Myers, can you send out that August 12th presentation to all the commissioners? Could that package show others?
The package and the link, it would be helpful, Daniel, if you could send that out to all of us. You probably have easier access to.
We had sent a memo to Manager Williams, and he sent it out to all the mayor and the commissioners. That includes both the video of that August 12th site selection committee presentation. So that link is included in that. Also included are all the public comments and statements that were made during both the in-person, both the July 12th and 20th. All those statements and questions and responses that we gave to the public are in there, as well as the in-person public input survey.
Daniel,
I'm just double checking.
Yeah, and was the PowerPoint included in that, or did you have to watch the video to see the PowerPoint?
Well, I'll be happy to share the
Yeah.
PowerPoint with Mayor and Commission as well.
All right. Daniel, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, thanks, everyone. Last item of the night is the long gestating SPLOST 2020 Project 22, our broadband connectivity plan. And I think Derek Doster is going to kick this off.
We're going to let Travis take us off, and I'll help finish this up. Yes, sir. Good evening. Thank you for having us. This is just a quick update on our broadband connectivity enhancement project. Tonight, we're just going to, I'll skip over the history, but we'll just talk about our goals, the target areas of where we're looking to have a network, what those boundaries look like for our fiber areas, and how we came to those conclusions. I'll remind you of the preliminary plan that y'all approved. That had we had a lot of community engagement that built a lot of those findings. Excuse me. And then Derek will go over some of the budget and some of our next steps. A lot of history. We've been working a while. So again, our goal
with this project is to expand broadband in our community for the county government as well as our community. The county needs a municipal network for a variety of reasons, public safety probably being number one, as well as serving our anchor institutions within the community, hospitals, schools. We need to expand our partnership opportunities with whoever. That could be people already in the community, businesses already in the community, as well as major ISPs outside of our community, because it's expensive to build and we need a lot of network in our community. So with that, we went to the public to inquire about their what sort of network speeds that they had at their homes, if they even had networks. So after our survey results, we were able to identify a lot of areas of need, and Derek will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we created what's called HUTs. Basically, it's areas in our community that would be served by communication buildings, and those areas are the areas in which each communication building could actually service. So we drew those based on current percentage of homes with reported access to fiber, the number of road miles needed to reach everybody at the end of the day, and also how many address points are actually served within those. And a lot of this was from survey data based on our residents responding to the survey, as well as data within Georgia, publicly available data within Georgia. After all of that analysis was complete, we were able to design the high-level map plan that you guys approved a few months ago, which the network goes into every fiber hut in Athens-Clarke County. So utilizing that approved preliminary map, Foresight Group, which is here tonight, identified the existing service and the needs of our area, as well as the total cost to build the network in our community. The report provides market capture, rates of return, business plans, as well as local ordinances that we could use to model some new things in our community revolving right-of-ways and things like that, which we heard a few things tonight that might actually be applicable for. And we've shown this slide before, but I wanted to remind you again, the backbone ring for just the network itself would be $12.6 million. And I will turn it over to Mr. Derek to explain some more fun things we've been doing.
Thank you. One of the things that we did with the report that Foresight Group helped us pull together is to develop what these build-out costs would be if we were starting today with no infrastructure there. And if we wanted to build a full county build-out, we've told y'all it'd be in the hundreds of million dollars today. You know, our estimate right now is about 126 million. But we were going to concentrate on the backbone ring as far as the needs of the county. One of the things that we do, of course, we have the $6 million that was approved in the 2020 program budget. And then you can see our typical designations that we pull money out, which leaves us about $3.6 million to help get us started on that. For, you know, if we went straight to construction, you know, we'd have that ability to put the 3.6 in it. We also can use that money to help leverage, get some grant funding, or reach out to our third-party providers and help expand that opportunity. One of the things, it seems a daunting task with the amount of money that we have and like a full build out would take. But one of the things that we wanted to bring to your attention, and again, tonight's an update just where we are and some of the things that we're doing. We're not bringing this forward with an agenda item afterwards, but we did want to share some good news with you as well. You know, we just had an opportunity to meet with one of the ISP providers in the community. And I want to bring attention to what we call the target zones that you previously approved, how we developed that high-level map. You see the red ovals. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, because one of the things we've done is we've pulled some data out of the Georgia Broadband Data Network which is available online. That link at the bottom will take you to there. And it actually says that about 1% is only 1% is left to be served in the area. There's a lot of definitions how that works. How is it true? Is it information provided by an SP provider? So keep that with a grain of salt. But a lot of areas in the county is technically served by the data. Now, one of the things that we do want to make sure that you are aware of, the light green and the dark green areas in the county, it's hard to see where the outline of the county is, but if you can envision those red ovals, they were reaching back out to these green areas. And so these are projects that are already in progress through third party, through the state grant funding and through the federal grant funding program from the RDOF and the ARPA grants. So the charter is actually pulled permits to do this work. So the areas that you see in green, we envision will be completed probably by the end of next calendar year. Maybe sooner, but we don't want to, it's their work, but that's our understanding. But this is publicly available data. We're not sharing any secrets. But those overlap with the target oval areas that we said that really needed help in the community. So we know that help is on the way. One of the things that we want to do as part of our update is to share with you some educational opportunities that we want to take. And one of them is, working through PIOH and other departments, is really get the information out on the FCC broadband map. This is where you can pull this up, type in your address, and it will tell you what internet providers say that is there. It may be true, may not. But the key point of this is, I use City Hall. You can see right above that, it says we've got several vendors, and I just use the City Hall address as an example. But what's neat about this is you have an opportunity to check your availability, if it's there, if it's not, and then you can challenge this location. Say, well, wait a minute, if you don't have that opportunity, or if Charter or AT&T or another provider has told you we can't serve that, and it says it's right here, you'll have an opportunity to challenge that. And that goes back into that database that we were talking about, and that's what funds a lot of these projects. With the state and the federal level, they're looking at this data to try to make sure that's where they put those dollars in. So we want to do an educational component of this to help teach people how to make sure that their voices are being heard. And when we do that, they'll update the maps periodically, and then that's what the next round of funding would be at the state and federal level. So from a summary status and action items that we want to do is, the first thing that we need to be clear on is broadband industry and that service is ever changing. Even though you may have service today, it might not be what you need tomorrow, and it may not be what your children or grandchildren need in the future. So just as a reminder, just because you're served, it doesn't mean that process may not change in the future. Again, we already mentioned it. We want to educate the residents and the businesses, verify, give them challenging opportunities, and give that information to those ISP providers that may be there at their door or maybe across the street and they just don't know how to access it. And then we want to be able to, as a government, support different ISP providers for federal grant funding. Some of these BEAD programs, some other types of grants that may be coming forward won't be delivered directly to us as the government, but they are looking for letters of support for them to provide those applications. Again, and then we want to collaborate with them. They've already got networks into place. We want to, utilize what we can, or if there are areas that, for example, we need to serve 2 miles to get to a neighborhood. For example, say maybe some of their grant funding only takes them a mile and a half. Then we could possibly use some of our funds to manipulate to get that rather quarter mile or half a mile into that. And that's why we need that collaboration and participation to do that. So those are some of the things that we want to work on that we'll be bringing forward through various opportunities. We want to create one of the things we need, our consultant here, Lee Cromer and his team is going to help us put an RFP out. And we want to put out this RFP for proposals to actually engage with those ISP providers to see what we can do. We want to build that backbone ring, let them lay that plan that we've already kind of developed a pro forma on, what possible capture they could get, what possible revenue is there, and give them that plan and say, this is what we need to connect our facilities for mission critical services, direct point-to-point stuff, and things that we don't even know about yet. And let them look at that and then overlay their network and then also come back to us and say, hey, we can put in X dollars if y'all put in so many dollars, and we can really build out that community that we want to have for everybody. And then lastly, some of the example ordinances that was in the report. We want to work with GMA and other appropriate agencies, and of course, the county attorney and manager's office and other departments to develop those ordinances. Let's say, for example, a new subdivision comes in right now. We would think that they would be served by broadband, but we don't know that there's an enforcement tool to make them do that. So those are the kind of things that we want to do. We already saw a presentation earlier where poles were in the middle of the sidewalk. Help us, when I say help us, use that collective bargaining tool to help further our needs. So if Charter is putting and I'm using them as an example only, if they're putting a line in, we want to make sure that they're collaborating with us, not, doing something in the vacuum, so we can make sure that we can move that and entice that program along. So next steps, we just want to continue our collaboration with other ISP providers. We want to start our education campaign, and we'll be reaching out to other departments and how do we need to best do that. We don't have a full plan yet, but we want to start that component. We think the FCC broadband map will be updated in November, so that will help in the next round of funding when the ISPs apply for that. Again, working with our team, we'll develop an RFP for the fiber ring. How do we serve our own needs first, and then how we develop those local ordinances. And I know, we've got January on there. That may take a little bit longer. And then hopefully by the end of next calendar year, we'll know what we can build and have it in construction.
Sounds good. Motion to adjourn.
I think.
Another GAP program.
Questions?
Nope, very straightforward. I like it.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Good work.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
Looking forward to
thanks,
next
everybody.
steps. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank
Dustin.
y'all.
All right, everybody. I hope you have a great night, and we will see you a week from tonight for our agenda setting meeting.
All right.